There was a young girl, a commentator on the TV in London a couple of mornings ago arguing about Trump and so on, as a usual, not very enlightening discussion. She's arguing with Piers Morgan and she says, you keep on saying I'm some supporter of Barack Obama. I mean, I'm a communist. She said, I'm literally a communist. Right. And thought, if this girl had said, you should be more careful, I'm literally a fascist, Yeah. Yeah. By the way, edit that one carefully on that. Yeah. No, I'm alive to YouTube.
That would be the New York Times headline.
Yeah, exactly. Literal fascist admits. But if this guy, everyone is busy searching around. Like in Canada, one of the big discussion forums, the Human Rights Commissions found that there were 11 people on this neo-Nazi forum, and it turned out half of them were working for the Canadian government trying to find neo-Nazis. Right. The Canadian government constituted 50% of the neo-Nazis in Canada. So they're scurrying around looking for the Nazis like this, and on the other side, it's like mainstream on the television, yeah, I'm a communist, I'd love to go through all that again. Yeah. The reason why so many people are going mad is, yes, we haven't found a way to deal with speaking to the world. I mean, it is impossible to find a manner of speaking which could simultaneously be you and a few people in a room, you and the people at your dinner, and possibly everyone in the world. It's jokes are the most obvious one. There is no joke so funny that it can be repeated to everybody in the world all the time.
Forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
And and we all know most jokes have some edge somewhere. Most of them are not going to last 5 years, let alone etc. So jokes are the obvious one. The other one is, and I was very worried by what Sam said about that, about the same self-censorship, or not self-censorship, but that thing of stepping back slightly. Because what is the problem for politics in all of our countries at the moment? What has produced this backlash in politics? It's that we've had a generation of politicians who can never say anything meaningful in front of people. I mean, I spend a certain amount of my life on shows with politicians, and I know, and Majid knows, that basically you see it in their eyes. Yeah. The aim is to survive the next half hour without plausibly or otherwise being accused of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, or something else. And you can see it in the other politicians. There's no meaningful win. The hope is that the other person says something which allows you to say, I think that's quite offensive to X group of people. And then the person goes, oh no. And then they're on the ropes and you got them. And if you get enough other people, you destroy them and they're dead. And that's it. And the point is that this is why politicians can't say anything.
This could be your effect on these politicians. But,
yeah, it may be. But the point is that this is why politics is going bad, because you can't tell any truth to that kind of audience. Now, the problem is, if down from politicians, or up from politicians maybe, you have the same effect, that the rest of the world also suffers the problem that politicians have of how to speak to everyone all the time. Because obviously this is a subject which is a more considerable landmine than many others as an issue. I think that one of the most important ground rules is this. You have to say, stop equating speech and violence. Stop saying, in all of this stuff, we need to find a way to think out loud. Okay, in a group like you're describing, or any other group, we have to find a way to think out loud and to try stuff out. Sometimes it will be wrong, often it'll be right, and so on, but we have to be able to have that ability. And one of the things that's stopping it is this endless equation of a thought that you've had and have voiced with the most extreme act of violence. So, for instance, if you say X, it's people like you that are the reason why so many of these people are killing themselves. You can't have any conversation if a part of the answer is being presented in that way. And I suppose just to see the people who are doing that as just using another tactic in order to win a particular sectional point. But allowing words to be words again is the beginning of some kind of solution.
it's a dialogue of the demented at the moment where the society says, there are some things we really strongly believe in, and if you don't believe in them, well, please do. It's not very assertively made. There's a sort of, well, what happens if I don't? Well, please do. There's no follow-up. There's a long way for this to run, and it doesn't all go in a good direction. The enormous risk that often happens of people absorbing the arguments of opponents who do not wish you well. So, for instance, on interventionism, you never hear, in fact, I've said this to Majid before, but I've never heard anyone from the Islamic world say, thank God for NATO.
Yeah.
But they should.
But by the way, I'd spend the rest of my book debunking these,
sure.
Just for everyone's,
But I mean, they shouldn't. The reason I mention this is for the selective historical reasons which we in the West are at risk of imbibing. For instance, I say, why does nobody say thank God for NATO? Because if NATO hadn't intervened in Kosovo, I think it's widely agreed that a severe genocide would have occurred on the continent of Europe, worse than was already happening. NATO intervened. We don't expect thank yous endlessly, but once would be something. And
thank you, Douglas.
So I have... It's not enough. But this is just worth remembering, because a generation and a lot of people from a generation are at risk of imbibing basically the jihadists' arguments about us. And I just put that out there at the beginning. The second thing I'd say quickly is, I mean, the fascinating thing now about looking back at, for instance, intervention in Afghanistan is that, it's one of the great fallacies of history which we're always vulnerable to, which is to think that everyone knew in the past what we know now. And, until the 1980s, the major threat to countries like ours was global communism, the Soviet expansionism. We saw it as a major threat. And anyone who doubts that just has to say that, I mean, if up until, I've often thought of this, until as late as basically the 10th of September 2001, if you said, in the early years of the 21st century, politicians, journalists, public intellectuals, and others are going to spend years talking about Islam. Say, what? Why? How come? It's not that interesting. It's not that vital in our societies. It's a bit of our societies. It's not overwhelming. If you said, okay, you're going to be discussing Islamic blasphemy laws all across Scandinavia for years. Why?
And the jurisprudence of face veils.
Yeah, and you're going to be the major debate in the UK in August 2018 is going to be the burqa. How does that happen? I don't see I don't see the way.
That is a bit surreal, isn't it?
So here's the deep underlying thing, which is that religion's back. And most people in the West don't know how to talk about it or think about it. And I've just got this endless concern about this matter, because I've had this conversation, as I think a lot of other people here have, for years with politicians and others, and they still don't understand the nature of this. And I just give you one example quickly. A little while ago, I was speaking to a TV producer who came over to me at a party somewhere and said, it was at the height of ISIS, and she said, what do ISIS want, Douglas? And I thought, oh, okay. Well,
they're actually quite upfront about it generally.
Yeah, they're quite. They've done a lot of speaking about this and a lot of writing, and they basically want to bring about they invite the world to Islam and bring about the end times. And this woman looked at me and she said, she said, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, they can't. I said, what do they really want? And I said, well, they say that they want to invite the world to Islam, or their version of Islam, and then bring about the end of times. And she just looked at me like, I don't see that. I don't. So, and then I realized, well, if I just said to her, basically what ISIS are after is like a 2.5% reduction in VAT. she'd have been all over it. Oh, yeah. Oh, I see. Well, would they settle for 1.2? You know, we'd have been able to talk about it.
It is a bit high, isn't it?
Let's find some compromise. But she had no idea. And that, for me, in a nutshell, is one of the things, one of the many things we're walking through at the moment, is the inability of people in societies like ours to realize that some of our opponents believe that they have the explanation for everything, the justification for everything, the meaning of everything, now, yesterday, tomorrow, and to the ends of time and eternity. And we say, come again?